Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We want to invite you to the buffet, but first we'll ask the head table to come and choose, and then we'll be followed by, suppose we do it this way. Table one, table two, right. Table one, they have to give not age, but recognition to the First Lady. Table two, table three, table four, 5 and 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. is the big thing for you?
So you want a next wine glass? What's your name? You need a next wine glass? I will take one from there. You okay? Guy, I'm gonna.
I know we missed something. Yeah.
You will know what they're going to do.
Typical politician.
So you probably have to grab two of them. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, that's my parents.
Okay. Yeah. This is
Table number 4 or 3, which one? Table with Dr. Martin, yes. But Mr. Herbert, you can lead the way. See somebody want to come.
Your Honor, Mrs. Hailita Liebert and Mr. Liebert, Minister of Agriculture, the Honorable Alexis Jeffers, Lady Sheila Daniel, Mr. Greg Rollins, Representative IICA delegation in the ECS, Ignatius Jean, former Minister of Agriculture, St. Lucia, and IICA representative for Guyana and Jamaica, Permanent Secretary in Ministry of Agriculture, Mr. Huey Sargent, former Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Livingston Sargent, Director Livingston, still thinking cricket, Livingston Herbert, and Mr. Elliott, Rodney Elliott, Director of Agriculture, the Venerable Franklin Brown, former headmaster of our honoree today, invited guests, special honoree Mr. Merchant, wife Carmelita, daughters Kelvin and Kelver and Curlin, welcome all. I heard of Murchie, as we call him, before I knew him. An older brother of mine, Hansel, was a teacher of his under Mr. Franklin Brown at the New River School. And he would come home after work with tales of 3 young men from the New River School. One I see here, Mr. Charles Busu. The other is Mr. Alistair Rollins. And the other one he referred to as Coolie Merchant. Never called him Augustine. I guess the name was unique to him. He figured maybe that it was a character from Greek mythology. And having been raised in a family of teachers, I figured, and reading from Nelson's West Indian Readers, I had learned that a coolie was a name given to people of Indian descent. So in my mind, I pictured somebody of Indian origin. When I met Murchie for the first time, I realized that he was pitch dark and that I was very, very wrong. One of the things my brother said is that he was good at cricket, but he was also bright. I learned a lot more about Merchant through the game of cricket. I've seen him played some good innings for Nevis, some dogged innings for Nevis, and he has also played some super innings in the civil service, in the field of agriculture, and of course, working with IICA for the last 19 years, in fact. And it is him today that we have come to celebrate for the sterling innings he has played. About the name Augustine, I must say his mother was prophetic, because one of the things which Murchie did was to go on to study at the UWI campus in Trinidad, which bears his name. But to tell you more about him and to present a profile to all of us here about the sterling contribution Mr. Merchant has made, I want to invite one of his former students, Mr. Antonio Abernathy Liebert, but also to let you know that we are being streamed live. And so we'd also like to welcome to Charlestown, Nevis, and at the Anglican Annex here in Charlestown, all our colleagues from IICA around the region, for a profile on the outstanding career of Mr. Augustine Merchant. I invite former student Abernathy Liebert.
Thank you, Mr. Master of Ceremonies. former student of yourself, you would have taught me in grade 6. Before I deliver the profile, I would like to recognize the presence of Her Honor, Mrs. Hailita Liebert, MH, and Mr. Liebert. I would also like to recognize the Honorable Alexis Jeffers, Minister of Agriculture in the Nevis Island Administration, the family of Mr. Merchant, his wife, Carmelita, his children, Kelva, Curlin, and his brother, Andrew. And I would also like to recognize the IICA representatives present here and those on the live video stream. Now, Marchi and I go way back. He, as you would hear from the profile, he taught me at the Gingerland Secondary School, and I must say that he was a very strict disciplinarian. I can recall one day while teaching us, Andrew passed outside the window and said, "Coolie." I think that when Andrew got home, he felt the wrath of Mochi. Mr. Augustine Merchant has retired from the Inter-American Institute of Cooperation on Agriculture delegation in St. Kitts and Nevis after serving the institution for 19 years. Prior to this, he served as Director of Agriculture on Nevis and gave a total of over 40 years of sterling service, public service, to the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. After the completion of his high school education, he pursued teachers' education and training at the St. Kitts Nevis Training College, Teachers Training College, and subsequently the Guyana School of Agriculture. Upon graduation in 1977, he was assigned to the Gingerland Secondary School, where he introduced agricultural science at the Cambridge General Certificate in Education, GCE, O-level. The examination results were outstanding. 2 students, Mr. George Sidney Newton, present here with us today, and myself, Antonio Abernathy Liebert, received distinctions. In 1981, the Gingerland Secondary School became the first school in the Federation to attempt the agricultural science at the CXC level. In that first year, his class received a pass rate of 98%, with the Honorable Eric Evelyn receiving a distinction. Mr. Merchant's phenomenal success did not go unnoticed. The late Professor Thomas Henderson of the University of the West Indies and the director of the Regional Caribbean Extension Project, in recommending Mr. Merchant to the United States Hubert Humphrey Fellowship Committee, wrote the following, and I quote, "Mr. Merchant, my investigation has revealed that there was in Nevis a young man, highly motivated, enthusiastic teacher, Mr. Merchant, who utilized to the fullest the meager resources of the Ministry of Education, and through sheer personal persuasion and amiable interpersonal relationships, obtained access to the farm and the field resources of the island's small Department of Agriculture. From these, he developed a teaching program, which challenged and aroused the interest of his students, who were in turn inspired by his obvious zeal in this subject. Hence the reason why Nevis, one of the smallest and least endowed islands in CARICOM, produced some of the best results in the regional agricultural science examinations. Mr. Merchant obtained a bachelor's degree in agriculture, upper second class honors from the University of the West Indies, and on his return to Nevis was appointed Director of Agriculture. The first order of business was to enhance the delivery capability of his extension staff and to inculcate in his farmers a sense of confidence and pride. In 1991, he pursued a MSc at Reading University in Great Britain. The following are some of his achievements while serving as Director of Agriculture. 1. Development of the first irrigation project in the Federation at New River Estate, Nevis, and the widespread use of drip irrigation system by farmers on Nevis. 2. Organized and instituted the Agricultural Open Day, which has become the Department of Agriculture flagship activity. 3. The development of 7 catchment dams at Catesby, which store 6.5 million gallons of water for use by farmers. 4. The development and nurturing of agricultural cooperative societies, which included the Nevis Growers Association and the Nevis Beekeepers Association. 5. The development of a marketing approach that is known as the Nevis model, which is a closely integrated production and marketing system as regarded as a best practice in the Caribbean. This marketing system was able to sell over easy $400,000 worth of vegetable and meat annually to the Four Seasons Hotel over a period of 10 years. In 2008, Mr. Merchant was honored with a Silver Jubilee Award by the Nevis Island Administration for his exemplified excellence, innovation, and leadership with agricultural development in St. Kitts and Nevis. In 2011, he was again honored by in Washington, D.C. by the Nevis, the Nevisian Association of Washington, D.C., NEVDC, for being an educator to students, booster to farmers, a promoter of sustainable development of our agricultural resources, and a tireless champion of all things Nevisian. At the commemoration of the 30th Independence celebration in 2013, Mr. Merchant was one of 30 persons to be recognized by the federal government for outstanding contribution to the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. From 2000 to the present time, Mr. Merchant has been employed as the coordinator of the St. Kitts and Nevis for the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, IICA. He has contributed significantly to the development of agriculture in St. Kitts and Nevis by addressing issues pertaining to the priority areas of this institute. Over the past 8 years, through his leadership at IICA, he has assisted local farmer organizations in achieving grant funds of over $500,000 from CEDA, the Australian Government Fund, UNESCO, PAHO, and the New Zealand High Commission. These include 1, receiving grant funds for Project Strong, led by the indefatigable Washington Archibald, for project entitled Preparing Disadvantaged Teenagers for Self-Employment. This project facilitated activities in viable areas such as beekeeping, agriculture, needlework, basketry, and agro-processing, and was valued at EC $65,000. 2. Project proposal developed for St. Kitts Farmers Cooperative. They received EC $49,000 to purchase a walk-in chill room, 1,500 crates, and 50,000 labels. Also grant fund of EC $43,000 to purchase inputs such as seeds, fertilizers, and fencing wire, and fund of US $20,000 to purchase hammer mill and labeling machine and a printer. 3. Receiving grant funds for greenhouses for government school farms in St. Kitts, Prospect Agricultural Station, Charlestown Primary and Secondary Schools, and the Gingerland High School, valued at EC $200,000. 4. Receive grant fund of over EC $125,000 to procure equipment for the Nevis Agro Processing Center. 5. Grant of US $10,000 to the Nevis Fishermen's Cooperative to procure fishing wire, rope, and buoy. 6. Grant of US $11,000 to the New River Farmers Cooperative to purchase walk-in chiller. 7. Grant fund of US $11,000 to the Nevis Agro-Processors Cooperative to purchase hammer mill, fence, and agro-processing center, and purchase one labeling machine and a printer. 8. Receive grant funds of EC $70,000 for the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College to establish a hydroponic system. Mr. Merchant has been the recipient of many awards to pursue various academic studies. These included the following: Canadian International Development Agency, CIDA, award to pursue agricultural science at the undergraduate level, the British Chevening Award to pursue postgraduate study in agricultural development at Reading University in the United Kingdom. And I must hasten to add that Murchie was the first Nevisian to receive this award. And when he received that award, there were some 30 other applicants from within the OECS region, and Murchie, hailing from the small island of Nevis, was awarded that scholarship. Additionally, United Nations Environmental Program Fellowship to study social forestry at Dresden University in Germany. And lastly, United States Hubert Humphrey Fellowship for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean to study agricultural development for 1 year at Cornell University in the United States. Mr. Merchant was also a very keen cricketer, as alluded to by our chairperson, Steve. During his playing days, he represented Nevis at cricket, at the Leeward Islands tournament level, and also at the Reading University cricket team. In addition, he captained the St. Kitts and Nevis Teachers Training College, the Guyana School of Agriculture, and the University of the West Indies St. Augustine campus cricket teams. At the 2019 Independence celebration, Mr. Merchant was a nominee for a national award, Companion of the Star of Merit, CSM. Mr. Merchant is married to Mrs. Camilita Merchant, and they have 3 daughters, Kelva, Curlin, and Kamisha. Ladies and gentlemen, a very outstanding profile of Mr. Augustine Frederick Merchant. I think that he deserves a round of applause. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Antonio, for so very ably outlining why we're here today to celebrate an outstanding servant of the people. When I walked into the classroom for the first time on September 9th, 1974, I met a group of students, including Abernathy, who were all taller than me. So if he didn't say it, you wouldn't know it. But by the look of things, he hasn't turned out too badly. The only thing he didn't learn was how to pronounce the word indefatigable. But well done, and thank you for profiling our honoree today, Mr. Augustine Merchant. I'd now like to invite former Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Livingston Herbert, to deliver remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Please allow me to adopt the protocol that has been established. But of course, I want to recognize Mr. and Mrs. Merchant and their daughters, because we're here, and as I went around the room, I detected a common thread. We are all here because we have interacted with Augustine Merchant on one level or another. Some of us are here because of teaching. Others are here because of our involvement in agriculture. And I know that you have heard the profile, but I want to spend a few moments and, as it were, go down memory lane and look at Murchie's contribution to agriculture. But before I do so, I must say that Murchie and I have had a long-standing relationship. We are from Gingerland. You have heard Steve talked about cricket or Abernathy. But Murchie cricket days really started with the Eastern Cricket Club. I have had the opportunity of Murchie being the captain, and at another time, I was the captain. Whether or not we won a lot of matches, the record would show. We are both Anglicans. In fact, I sit one pew ahead of Murchie in church. And we normally go to church fairly regularly. I must tell you that when I got confirmed, Murchie was my sponsor. I don't know if you recall that. And if I didn't say thank you then, I think this is an opportune time. You know, better late than never. Murchie came to the department in 1981. And I will just kind of fill in some blanks. You would have heard much from Abernathy in 1981. And I want to make some connections, because at this time of year, last year And about 2-3 weeks ago, they had a ceremony at the agro-processing unit, the training. And you hear about agro-processing. But before there was agro-processing, there was the abattoir, and there was the cutting room as a precursor to the agro-processing unit that has been established. And in a way, we must give credit to the leader of the department, the Chief Agricultural Officer, Mr. Augustine Merchant. It was some vision. And the thing about it, he took incremental steps. Sometimes for us, we wonder why he acts so slowly. But in the end, he acted. And what he acted upon has lasted. It is interesting that Professor Tom Henderson made the recommendation about mercy in education. Professor Henderson was one of the architects who created the Caribbean Agricultural Extension Program, a program which I believe has really placed mercy at a level above many other directors of agriculture in the region. Because out of that program, Nevis was the envy when it came to the agricultural extension program. In fact, as a result of that program, I think we have had 3 officers from Nevis who were awarded Agricultural Officer of Excellence in the Caribbean. You had Dr. Keithley Jones, Honorable Roberto Hector, and Eric Evelyn. It says a lot. And one of the things that really put us on the map was our program, and I think we are at the end of the World Food Day program, but that was something we look forward to year after year because of the Director of Agriculture interests. I can speak to the marketing effort, and we have with us Daniel Atherton, who led the charge. But it was because of the vision of the leader why, for 10 years, consistently, we were able to sell to Four Seasons some 60+ agricultural commodities in excess of $400,000. Murchie was a hard worker. And I believe he was able to work hard because of the support of his family, and by extension, by the support of his staff. You have heard about Murchie's role in agricultural land reform, or was it at the table that someone was discussing when land was being sold for $4,000? Murchie was the director of agriculture. He was, as it were, the forerunner for what we have now in terms of the residential development based on the land reform program. I can go on and on and on and talk about Augustine Merchant. But I think I want to make probably one or two other points. Merchant, I believe, was not happy with the response of the relationship between the federal government and the Taiwanese program. And he believed that to get more funding this, we had to get a representative of Taiwan in Nevis from the program. And that was done. He worked tirelessly for that. And particularly, the farmers in Cage Bay would have benefited tremendously. I seem to recall, after Danny left the department, he went into farming. And I recall him saying that as a result of the intervention of the Taiwanese, is the biggest tomato he has ever grown. And that said something, not so much for the Taiwanese, but for the vision of Augustine Merchant. Augustine Merchant spent 38 years in agriculture. He would have worked, by my reckoning, with about, may I have some water, please? With about 8. Thank you very much. With about 8 permanent secretaries. About 8. Today, we have with us Mr. Elmer Liebert. He has worked with about 8 ministers of agriculture in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Under his leadership, 3 of his employees became ministers of agriculture. So somebody has to explain to me if Augustine Merchant is not the biggest politician in Nevis. And guess what? He worked on both sides. And we all have respect for him. And that is what I believe development is about. And that is the character of the man. Now, I guess after 38 years, one can be tired. But while we say thank you to Augustine, the work is not yet done. And I want to challenge, I see that the Minister of Agriculture here. I want to challenge the Minister of Agriculture that with Augustine knowledge, his experience, his contact, we cannot afford at this time to allow him to sail off in the sunset. No. There's much room for him. During his time, he had support from Evan Nisbet. He had support from one Ian Gordon and Jennifer Lowry, Cardi's representative on the island. And I believe that then we had a more mature approach to agriculture. Those who were engaged in agriculture extension were self-starters. And with his experience, certainly, he can be a good mentor to the present Ministry and Department of Agriculture. I don't think I need to say more. Mr. Merchant, as I have said, we have had a long relationship. And I can go on and on and on. Suffice it to say that a lot of initiatives he would discuss and discuss. And when he feel as if he had the right mix, he said, now is the time to move. I see Dr. Bartlett there, and I'm sure she can recall many conversations with Murchie as Director of Agriculture. And at the time, perhaps, we may not have liked some of the decisions he made, but guess what? We fall in line, and Nevis has been the better for it. And I want to say thank you, Augustine.
Thank you, Livingston. That coming from someone who has walked shoulder to shoulder and toe to toe over all these years with Mr. Merchant. I just wanted to put one thing that you said in historical context. You described him as the forerunner of the land reform program in Nevis. Well, we've got here Lady Sheila Daniel, and her husband we all acknowledge as the father of modern-day Nevis. As recently as this morning, in a telephone call, Merchant told me how Mr. Daniel came to his home to solicit his services to be Director of Agriculture. So, in truth and fact, and I'm sure he'll say that when he comes to the podium, that he was a vehicle through which the land reform program was implemented. But it was really the mantra of the late Premier, first Premier of Nevis, the Honorable Simeon Daniel, and I want you, even though he's not here, to acknowledge the contribution he has made. Now, you've heard that Murchie has been around for over 4 decades, working first in Nevis, then on St. Kitts, but always liaising with the Ministry of Agriculture in Nevis and helping farmers in every way possible. So from one former Minister of Agriculture, I want to invite to the podium the present Minister of Agriculture to tell us how thankful he is for the services rendered by Mr. Augustine Merchant.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Master of Ceremonies. And I want to start this afternoon by acknowledging members of the head table, Her Honor, Deputy Governor General, Mrs. Hailita Liburd and Mr. Liburd. The honor, I want to say the honoree this afternoon, or the man of the moment, Mr. Augustine Merchant and Mrs. Merchant, and both Kelver and Curlin. I also want to recognize in the audience quite a number of former employees at the Department and Ministry of Agriculture, and also agriculture enthusiasts and friends and family members of Mr. Merchant who have gathered here this afternoon. And of course, we're going live or streaming live, so we're being heard in all of the countries that are affiliated with IICA as well, and I want to say good afternoon to everyone. I feel honored this afternoon to stand here because I never worked with Mr. Merchant. As a matter of fact, I've never worked in the Ministry or Department of Agriculture before. At least I'm the Minister of Agriculture now. But I want to say to you that I am pleased to stand before you and have been asked to say a few words. And I believe it's simply because I'm the Minister of Agriculture. But that being said, I am proud to stand here this afternoon and say to you, and I believe I can say to Mr. Merchant as well, Mr. Merchant, you're my friend. And he acknowledged that by nodding his head. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that. A lot of things have been said about Mr. Merchant and his exploits as an agricultural enthusiast or someone who would have worked diligently for a number of years in the agricultural sector here on the island of Nevis. And his impact would have gone far and wide. But I also want to say to you this afternoon that Mr. Merchant is someone who, back in 2013, when I became the Minister of Agriculture, he was the one who made an appointment to come and see me. And I believe that was the start of many good things that was to come. He sat with me and discussed, and you could have seen the passion in his general demeanor at the time, that he feel much more could have been done in agriculture and much more could have been accomplished up to that point in time because he had that drive and passion. And Mr. Merchant, I don't know if you recall that first meeting, but you almost came to tears. And I almost came to tears myself because I was young in the business, so to speak, and I felt good knowing someone who was much older than I am, and I say much, but that is not a knock on you at all. But I say someone who was much older than I was at the point in time. And with the experience that he brought at that point in time, I figure this is someone who I would have to lean on in order to make some headway in agriculture as the minister here on the island of Nevis. Now, after that conversation, it was, getting to know Merchant over the years. Because although you'd have heard so many good things in the profile that was given earlier, and a lot of it bears repeating, yes, but I'm not going to repeat all of that, but you'd have heard that he was a cricketer at some point in time. And I can recall as a young man growing up, and Mr. Merchant, you have to forgive me, but this is just me. When I heard Mr. Merchant going into bat, I didn't have much hope. Honestly, I didn't have much hope. But I leave it as that. But it is obvious that cricket was not your calling at that point in time, but agriculture was and is. And that is what I want to talk about this afternoon. And I want to say, before I say what I have to say, I want to preface it by saying, there is a saying out there that you can take a man out of the island, but you can't take the island out of the man. Some people say the country, but I want to zero in and say the island. Because Murchie is a Nevisian, and he was born here, and he would have gone across to St. Kitts, for example, to work with IICA for about 19 years, I understand. But I can tell you, every time Merchant decide to do something, whether it's writing a grant proposal or seeking funding for anything, he always think about Nevis first. And that is why I say you can take a man out of the island, but you can't take the island out of the man. And listen, I wanted to give Merchant a round of applause because I see a good friend of his laughing there, but I believe he understands what I'm saying. Because Merchant would go about seeking funding for numerous projects. And the first thing he would pick up the phone and he would call me and tell me, I'm writing this project and Nevis is going to get its share. And I want to thank him for that because I don't have the expertise in that area, and I must admit. But when a person do not have the expertise in something, you lean on those who have it. And that is what I would have done with Merchant. And I will tell you more, because I have attended one, the annual general meeting, or biannual general meeting of IICA in Mexico, I believe it was, back in 2015. And Murchie called me and told me, Minister Hamilton cannot make it, and I want you to go. Of course, I went. And then this time around again, later this month, Minister Hamilton is unable to go, and Murchie has called and said, I want you to go. So I told you already, you can take a man out of the island, but you can't take the island out of the man, because he's looking out for divisions. I want to also say to you this afternoon that Mr. Merchant I believe I can safely say, he was the gentleman who introduced shade house technology to the island of Nevis. He would have done so. When you pass the Prospect area, you would see 2 shade houses there. You can give him credit for both. In that, I believe it's about $10,000, Mr. Merchant, you might have secured for the first one, along with some additional input from the Nevis Island administration at that point in time. But the second one that is there, it was through the collaboration of both IICA and CARDI, who would have secured that shade house for the Department of Agriculture. Not only that, the New Zealand High Commission, he would have brought, I forgot the name of the lady at this point in time, but he would have brought her to see me. And of course, he would have secured some funding through that, through the New Zealand High Commission as well, for additional shade houses for Charlestown Primary School. And also he would have worked on shade houses up in the, up at the Gingerland Secondary School, sorry. Additionally, I can go on and give you a lot of the exploits of Mr. Merchant, but one of the things I can safely say to you this afternoon, he was always big on training. And Gary is here in the audience with us this time. Gary, you want to put up your hand and let everybody see you? Gary is the one who is the manager at the abattoir. In 2004, Mr. Merchant was responsible for getting Gary off to Jamaica to get some training in meat cutting and processing and the likes. Now, just about 15 years later, Mr. Merchant would have organized a training session between the Department of Agriculture and St. Kitts, that's the Abattoir Division, and the Department of Agriculture Abattoir Division here in Nevis. That was about 2 weeks ago. And the facilitator for that training session was Mr. Gary Griffin. And that speaks volume in the sense that the training that most of us would receive from time to time, we take it for granted. We go abroad, spend about a week or whatever the case might be. But then we do nothing with that training. But Mr. Merchant would have ensured that not only Gary got the training, but additional persons were able to benefit. And over the years, he would have worked tirelessly to ensure that the abattoir division gets certain pieces of equipment and also additional items that are needed to make sure that we are providing the necessary meat cuts and products to our people here on the island. You'd have heard about the exploits at the agro-processing unit. We can go on because that is one of the areas that I do believe that Merchant has an affinity for, or interest for, and a love for. And he would have done so with all of the necessary finances and grant funds that he would have gotten over the years. I see Emantine down there in the audience as well. Murchie, a lot of good friends have come along to celebrate with you. Emantine is there waving. I think she needed to be recognized. You'd have worked tirelessly with Emantine as well, and I see you nodding your head because Emantine is one of the farmers here on the island of Nevis. Gives a lot of trouble, but she produces some quality crops. And as I say, producing, you, Mr. Merchant, have always been keen and has shown a keen interest in ensuring that there's production and productivity here on the island of Nevis. And that is why I believe you're an institution in your own right. You're Mr. Agriculture yourself. And that is why we are sad to be here this afternoon to see you go, but also happy for what you have provided us here on the island of Nevis. And I say sad, yes, but I believe Mr. Merchant would have, not Mr. Merchant, Mr. Herbert would have hinted to the fact that you're retiring, yes, but do not let you go or ride off into the sunset. Mr. Herbert, we're one step ahead of you. I asked the permanent secretary to make sure he put something in the budget so that we can see how we can keep Mr. Merchant around. He said he's fed up of sailing across the waters to St. Kitts every morning, so we want to make sure that he stays here and still impart some of the knowledge that he still has in his repertoire, in his cabinet at home. So, Mr. Merchant, we're going to find some way to utilize you before someone else comes after you, because I do believe you still have a lot to offer. Ladies and gentlemen, I do not want to keep you too long, for sure, because you've heard a lot about Mr. Merchant. And you'll be seeing more of him, not because he's retired. He's not tired, but he's retiring from his current position, yes. But I do not believe he's that tired to go home and rest. Mrs. Merchant do not want him around the house. I do not think so. Not to sit down all day, because I believe Murchie has started his crop farming down at Zion. You have about an acre. Merchant, you see, I know a lot about him. I know a lot about him. He cannot sit idly by, so I do not expect Mr. Merchant to just go home and pick up a newspaper and relax at all. I believe the passion and the drive is still there, and he would ensure that he continues to blaze the trail in agriculture here on the island of Nevis. Mr. Merchant, I said to you before, whomever replaces you as the local coordinator, I want you to bring them to me first, because I am going to tell them what we would have accomplished with you, and I would love for us to double that, do much, or far exceed that. It means that agriculture would be much the better as a result. So keep that in mind. Whenever that person is selected, bring them to my office and let's have a conversation. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to wrap up now, but I'm going to say in closing, Mr. Merchant, the fact that many of your friends and families and some of your past workers and associates have come this afternoon to celebrate with you, it's indicative of the fact that you would have done a marvelous job first of all, as a teacher. And before I go any further, my teacher came up here earlier and read the profile, Mr. Libert, Abernathy Libert. He was my former teacher. I like to knock him. Everyone can say that they were impacted positively by their teacher, but I believe Mr. Libert, Abernathy, he did something back in the day that caused me to drop agriculture and move on. And I'm going to tell you what it is publicly, because I always rib him about it. You know this thing you call practical, when you go out in the field and you fork up the land and you get a mark for it. He used to give all the girls 10 out of 10. He gave me 5 out of 10 when someone was asking me what I do to the ground. I was forking so much that I thought I would have gotten 10. Abo gave the young ladies 10. You know why? But that's all right, Abo. That's okay. You're still a good friend of mine. That's all right. But anyway, I was saying, Mr. Merchant, that your effort is still needed here on the island of Nevis. I still want to work with you, and I am going to give you the assurance that whatever ideas you bring to the table, as you have done in the past, I would love to embrace them and make sure that it is done for the betterment of the agricultural sector here on the island of Nevis, and ultimately the island of Nevis. We do need more persons in the business of agriculture here on Nevis, because I do believe it's an area that you can make a healthy living. You can make money. Enough money is there to be made, because Emmantine is indicative of that, or an example of that, because she makes a lot of money. So that being said, Mr. Merchant, I wish you well in retirement, but I also want to welcome you back to some work, because I do believe we can work together still. And I don't want to lose you, and I don't want anyone to pick you up before we can sit and have a chat and see how you can continue to make that impact here on the island of Nevis. So I want to say thank you. May God continue to bless you. May God continue to bless your entire family, because you would need their support as you get on in the years to come. And I do want to say to them as well that at any time that I'm called upon, I'll be happy to play my part as I would have done in the past. Thank you very much, and may God continue to bless you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for commending Mr. Augustine Merchant. I wanted to take you up on one thing, and I won't be presumptuous to take you up on anything in agriculture because that is not my forte. But you seem to question Merchant's ability at cricket. On his record, he's just got one dubious moment. In 1973, he was part of a team which Nevis sent out, which included the President of the Assembly, Mr. Farrell Smithen, and Murchie's good friend who's sitting in the middle, Everett Weber Herbert. I think he was the youngest member of that team. And they were defeated by Antigua, St. Kitts, and Montserrat by an innings. It's the only dubious moment in his cricket career. He was pretty dogged. In that same year, Livingston Sargent made 214, falling just short of the Leeward's record of 216 in a score of 279. The next closest score to his in that match was Merchant's 33. Now, we have heard that Merchant's footprints are all over this room. I sweep around, I see Merle, there's Sydney, there is Ford, there is Gary, there is Pat, there is the man with the white beard right there, all over the field. But he has impacted far more than just St. Kitts Nevis, but the entire region. Very often you would call me and say, I'm going off to Costa Rica for a week, or I'm going off to St. Lucia. So now we are going regional. And I would like to invite to the podium Mr. Greg Rollins, representative of IICA delegations in the ECS.
Thank you very much, Mr. Master of Ceremonies. I want to recognize the Deputy Governor General, Mrs. Liburd, and Mr. Liburd, Mr. Augustine Merchant, our honored guest, and his wife, Mrs. Merchant, and their daughters, Honorable Alexis Jeffers, the Minister of Agriculture and Nevis Island Administration, Mr. Livingston Herbert, former Minister of Agriculture, Antonio Liburd, specially invited guests, and I want to recognize my colleague, former colleague, Mr. Ignatius John, the former Minister of Agriculture of St. Lucia, and also IICA rep, Mrs. Ingrid Green, the Executive Secretary with the IICA delegation here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and our colleagues who are joining us on the virtual link from the other IICA offices. A pleasant good afternoon to all. It is indeed a very distinct pleasure and a privilege for me to be here, to be part of this very special occasion where we honor my colleague, and may I say my countryman, Mr. Augustine Frederick Merchant. Yes, people are looking at me a little strange, but I actually was born in this island, and it is indeed a very, very special moment for me to be here as IICA representative in the ECS as we pay tribute to Augustine Merchant and his contribution. I also want to convey warm greetings on behalf of our Director General, Dr. Manuel Otero, the Director General of IICA, and all of the staff of IICA, but in particular, convey greetings on behalf of the entire team in the ECS, the Eastern Caribbean States. The 6 countries in the Eastern Caribbean States, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia. Merchant has been a part of that team, an integral part of that team over the years, and I want to convey from that entire team, Merchie, our best wishes as you move on. My first interaction with Mr. Merchant goes back many years. We were both at the St. Augustine campus during the same period. We lived on separate halls. Merchant was on Milner Hall, I was on C Hall. I don't think we were in the same year, but no one could miss Augustine Merchant. He was known for his cricketing ability. I don't want to say much more about that, but just to say that he was recognized as one of the outstanding cricketers on campus. It's over the last 15 to 20 years, however, that I would have had an opportunity to work closely with him, more closely with him. And since I joined IICA in 2008, we have had an excellent relationship. I know that others would have spoke to his contributions. The profile was extensive. We are all aware of his great contribution that he's made over the years. But I want to focus on, say a bit about his contribution to IICA. And through IICA, the contribution he's made to this federation and the wider Caribbean. Augustine has served in a number of roles for IICA here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And I believe that one of his major accomplishments and one of the areas that he is most recognized for is his role as a mobilizer. You would have heard when the profile was presented about his unmatched capacity to mobilize funds, to seek assistance, to get financial resources, to get technical assistance. I don't know how he does it, but it seems as though people don't say no to Mr. Merchant. He's been able to work with a wide cross-sections of donors and development partners across the Caribbean, various high commissions from New Zealand to Australia to CEDA, UNESCO, PAHO, all of them, to mobilize resources to support the development of the agricultural sector here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And we heard from Mr. Leiber, who presented the profile, the extensive list. In fact, over the last 8 years, over 500,000 EC dollars. And I want to say that, in fact, there are very few IICA professionals who can claim to have mobilized as much resources as Mr. Merchant. I intend to have him share some of his secrets with me and the other colleagues. And I must say, and the Minister Jeffers would refer to him, you can't take the island out of the man. One former representative would often say that he had to remind Merchant that it was St. Kitts and Nevis. But I must say that he has been very balanced and very fair. He has done what is expected. You must support both islands. And I say that because it's very easy when you have two islands for one island to be neglected. And I think in the case of having Mr. Merchant from Nevis, created a balance. And we do hope, Minister, that we can ensure that we find someone who can ensure we maintain that balance as we move forward. So, Mr. Merchant, please, we're going to be calling on you to share those secrets with us. He does not, Mr. Merchant is a very determined man. He does not take no for an answer. I think most of you would know that. If Mr. Merchant is calling the office and he doesn't get me on the cell, he's calling me on the IP phone. If he doesn't get me on the IP phone, he's calling the other phone. He's calling every phone in the office till he reaches me. Because he's determined to get the message through. And that determination, I believe, is what has paid off in terms of being able to get the attention and the support of stakeholders. They recognize that he's serious. But in addition to being a mobilizer, Mr. Merchant has been a pioneer and a leader. Yes, his mark, we have referred to the indelible mark that he has left on the agricultural sector here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And I believe that he has done that by being extremely visionary. He has identified things that he believes will make a difference, that will make impact, and he's pursued them continuously. And I want to make reference to his contribution in the area of the introduction and the promotion of greenhouse technology. Mr. Merchant has been relentless in his efforts to secure assistance, whether it be technical or financial assistance, to introduce protected agricultural structures long before we were all talking about climate change. He was on the bandwagon, recognizing that we needed to have that type of technology that would allow us to produce during certain times of the year and have better control over the external environment in which agriculture operates. So he has consistently worked in this area, and reference was made to the greenhouses that were procured under different donors, and they're all over. They're at schools, they're at various education institutions, at the Cardi Research Station and so on. There are a number of greenhouses, and they're in operation. That's the other thing with Mr. Merchant. The things that he has led are still in operation, have yielded results. They're not just done and they fall by the wayside, but they actually yield results. And I believe that the work that he has done in introducing the greenhouse technology to the schools and the academic institutions will augur well in terms of exposing young people to this technology, and therefore encourage them to be able to play their part as they move on. The other area that I believe that Mr. Merchant has been very pioneering is the area of promoting value-added processing. We all accept that to develop the agricultural sector, we can't just do primary production. We need to add value to what we produce. That way we can better meet the requirements of the markets. And Mr. Merchant has been, again, extremely influential in mobilizing resources to support agro-processing operations. More recently, he's worked a lot in the area of processing of mango. A lot of work in the area of processing of mango, working with the various processors. We know the situation with mangoes when they're in abundance, so many of them waste. Mr. Merchant has been able to access equipment that will allow for the pulping of mango and even looking at the export of mango pulp to our neighboring islands. This is the type of thing that is important. He's been able to access equipment from countries far afield, India and so on, that can do this type of work. And I think that we cannot allow some of those initiatives to fall by the wayside. We need to continue in terms of building upon the excellent work that he has done. He's also, and a reference was made to the work that has been done. Is Gary? Is Gary? Yes. I myself was able to visit the facility here and see the work that was being done by Gary in terms of the burgers and the sausages and so on. This is excellent work going on right here in Nevis. And recently, Mr. Merchant ensured that the folks from St. Kitts came over so they themselves could also be trained and can also do the same thing in St. Kitts. And we intend, in fact, to see how we could use the capacity of Gary and the team here to help some of the other countries in the region who have an interest in adding value to their meat products. So we really need to applaud the efforts that have been made. I think he's been really a leader and a pioneer in some of these areas. In addition to being a mobilizer and a pioneer and a leader, Mr. Merchant has been an excellent collaborator. He's been able to build partnerships far and wide, both in St. Kitts and Nevis and beyond. And only recently, he would have spearheaded the signing of an agreement between IICA and the Republic of China, Taiwan, the first such agreement between IICA and the Republic of China, Taiwan in the Caribbean region. In addition, he's been working not just with the Ministry of Agriculture, but with the Ministry of Sustainable Development here in St. Kitts and Nevis to actually explore the development of a project for submission to the Green Climate Fund, so that he's been able to identify potential opportunities. Yes, it's still at the concept note stage, but we are hoping that if this can be materialized, that we can access significant resources that will contribute to the work in terms of building the resilience in the agricultural sector and helping the agricultural sector to address climate change impacts. So that Mr. Merchant, again, has been providing that leadership. He's been an excellent mentor and team player. There are many colleagues in the ECS region that, from the time they join the ECS team, Mr. Merchant will call them and offer his advice, his guidance, and will always be willing to share. So he's served that role as a mentor and a team player to many of the colleagues in the Eastern Caribbean. And we want to recognize that contribution because he was always seen as Mr. Merchant, the big man, you know, the one who had vast experience. And therefore, some of the younger members of the team look up to him and depend on him for guidance. Finally, there's Augustine Merchant, the professional. You can be a very good technician, you can be a very good leader, you can be a very good mobilizer, but at the end of it all, it goes back to those qualities, those attributes, those values that you hold. And I believe that that is where Mr. Merchant has it. He has always been a professional that has adopted very high values. He's been someone who you can say is hardworking, dedicated, committed, very loyal, honest, a man with integrity, a man that commands respect. And I believe that this in itself, those qualities, those values, have stood him in very good stead as he has worked and served over the years. It is therefore not surprising that Mr. Merchant has been awarded so many awards over the years, and recently, again, reference was made to him being awarded the Companion Star of Merit for his contribution. The Director General of IICA has written to Mr. Merchant congratulating him for this award, which is richly deserved. And I want to join with my staff in the Eastern Caribbean region in offering congratulations to him on this achievement. In closing, I wish to take this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to express our thanks and appreciation on behalf of the entire IICA family to Mr. Augustine Merchant for his contribution to the Institute over the last 19 years. We thank you so very much, Augustine, for all that you have brought to us in IICA. Your commitment, your hard work, your friendship, your sharing, your humanity. You have been a stalwart, and you and your contributions will be sorely missed. Filling your shoes will be a challenge for us. In the same vein, I wish to take this opportunity to wish you all the best as you move on to another phase of your life, as you put on those new tires. We wish you good health, happiness, success in all you do, and we look forward to maintaining close contact with you in the future. Enjoy your newfound freedom and make the most of it. I also wish to extend best wishes to you and your family. Mr. Master of Ceremonies, with your permission, I will invite some of the colleagues in the offices to bring remarks briefly at this point in time. Colleagues, we're going to call on the offices one by one. Could we call on the office in Grenada first?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. You hearing me?
We need some more volume. You have any more volume?
Not really.
You're very low.
Okay.
Speak loud, speak loud, speak as loud as you can.
Hear me now, Greg? Okay, I'm on. Hello?
Yes, well, we're not really hearing you loud. But go ahead, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Let me just check if I can get more volume. Hello?
I don't know this computer.
Are you hearing me now?
Hold
That's all the volume I have, Greg.
Hold 1 second, Derek.
Yeah. Volume your nose, Greg. See, Mr. Merchant, good afternoon, everyone. Are you hearing me?
Where's the speaker? Continue.
You there?
You go ahead, Derek. I will let Mr. Merchant draw close so he can hear you at least.
Okay.
Again, close my mic.
Okay, Mr. Merchant, good afternoon, everyone. Again, I must say that from the Grenada delegation, I'd like to wish you happy retirement. I had the opportunity to know you first at the University of the West Indies. True. Okay. Okay, I got to know you through University of the West Indies through one of your colleagues, Mr. Sidney Newton, who always talked highly about you in terms of your cricket. I'm getting a feedback. Greg, I'm getting a feedback.
We are hearing you, though. We are hearing you.
I am getting a feedback.
He's getting a feedback. I don't want to open our mic. We should open the mic.
Greg, I'm getting a feedback.
It's a loud feedback?
Yeah, loud enough to disturb me.
Oh, because we're hearing you clearly, you know.
Okay, all right.
So
Can I just start again?
No. You were going up to the point where you said that there was a colleague that you knew, Merchant.
True, Mr. Sidney Newton always talk highly about you, especially in cricket. And but I never got to meet you at the university. However, the first time I met you when I joined IICA some years ago. Mr. Merchant, I must say that your book has not yet finished with being retiring from IICA. It's just the end of a chapter. So there are much more chapters to be completed. Your contributions to cricket, to society, to agriculture were all outstanding. With such sterling contributions to agriculture, you would have touched many lives. And I believe that you cannot go wrong with starting a new chapter, as your passion is to improve the quality of life of those you serve. Someone mentioned that they must find some way to utilize you. Mr. Rollins mentioned that you're a leader. So what could that chapter be going forward? Being a family man, a cricketer, a well-known person in society, very popular. Should I suggest you be a politician? Thank you very much, Mr. Merchant, and all the best on your retirement.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Derek. Could we have St. Lucia now, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the IICA delegation in St. Lucia, and personally from Brian Gittins, Alistair Glynn, Deborah Biscom, Juliet Bowers, Valerie Donat, and Sylvanus Augustine, and lastly, Brent Theophil, Mr. Merchant, it has been a true pleasure knowing you, working with you, and benefiting from your experience, exceptional persistence in finding people and tracking them to get something done. And most importantly, for me as a young professional and still in the midst of making my career with IICA, you have been a really great example with regards to integrity, dedication to the job, and mobilizing resources and effective part. Those are really great examples for any professional. So, I'm fortunate to have known you that more to family and all the success we check them.
Internet problem there. We're losing St. Lucia with the internet. Brent, are you still there?
Yes, I'm there, but there seems to be a lag.
Okay, you continue. We were hearing you up to a point. Go ahead. Brent?
Yes, sir, can you hear me?
I'm hearing you now, yes. Go ahead.
Wonderful. So, in conclusion, just wishing Mr. Merchant and his family the best and success in his future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brent. Thank you very much, IICA St. Lucia. I see Dominica is on. I thank you very much, Brent. Dominica is on. Floor is yours. Is Dominica hearing us?
Good afternoon, Mr. Merchant and family. Mr. Coppell is presently hosting a virtual meeting, so he's unable to be here, but I'm sure he'll be in touch with you at some time. And I just want to wish you a long, happy, and healthy retirement. I heard that work is not yet done for you, so I cannot say no more targets, goals, or deadlines and meetings. But whatever you choose to do, I wish you all the best. And that's from the Dominican delegation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Maureen. I see Merrill is on. Merrill, the floor is yours.
Well, he says she doesn't have a microphone.
Oh, hello?
So,
Yes, Derek?
you what?
So
What
you,
you say?
so you spoke for yourself and Merrill, right? I saw
Yes,
him.
Greg, that's correct, Greg, yes.
Okay, fine, no problem. That means that's everybody. Anybody else is on? I see Rosette. Rosette? Michael?
Greg?
Ah, Michael is
Hello?
there. Yes, Michael, go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, Greg. I'd like to say good afternoon to the gathering, and especially to my colleague, Mr. Augustine Merchant. Mr. Merchant, I'd like you, on behalf of myself and Rosette Bacchus, I'd like to wish you all the best in your retirement. I can say this, that when I came into IICA, there was a certain representative who I met in Costa Rica in my first few days, who guided me towards Mr. Merchant as a person full of knowledge as to how I should approach this job in St. Vincent. Given the fact that Merchant himself was accessing a fair amount of resources from the several agencies that support development purpose in the agricultural sector here in the ECS. And I did have a conversation with Merchant, and that conversation actually led me a long way towards accessing resources on behalf of the IICA delegation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This I much appreciated much. I will miss our long talks on many issues, but I hope that you wouldn't shut yourself off entirely from us, and that you will from time to time call me, and likewise I will call you when I need some advice on various issues. So all the best in retirement, Butch, and we'll see very shortly, I hope. God bless.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Michael. The IICA delegation is St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And just to apologize for the absence of Craig for the IICA delegation in Antigua and Barbuda. He's in Barbuda, and they're having some internet problems, but he's on behalf of the entire Eastern Caribbean States team, we want to thank you for your support and for your contributions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg, and your colleagues who joined us from across the region. You've heard it from the proverbial horse's mouth, giving testimony of Mr. Merchant. I'd like to give some credit to Ingrid Green Mills, very quietly efficient. We have mentioned her for the afternoon, but she has for so many years anchored that office in St. Kitts and has been the backbone to Mr. Merchant. I smile when I hear people talk about retirement. People talk about putting on new shoes and new tires and all that stuff. Retirement what? How can Mr. Merchant retire? You heard Minister Jeffers speak about the acre of land. Murchie has been working that already. Brought me 6 nice squash on Sunday morning. So where's the retirement? He's really moving on from one stage of his life to another. Now, we heard earlier on the sidelines that Mr. Ignatius Jean, French teacher Hensley at the back, former Minister of Agriculture in St. Lucia, and the past representative of IICA in Guyana and Jamaica. We heard that he happened to be in St. Kitts and heard about the ceremony here, and he decided to catch the ferry and come over. We're honored to have you this afternoon and invite you to bring greetings.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Master of Ceremonies. Good afternoon, everyone. Deputy Governor General, Mrs. Liebert and Mr. Liebert, and the man of honor, our man we are honoring this afternoon, Mr. Merchant and his family. And to all of you, I recognize quite a number of people that I've worked with over the years. My good friend, Danny Atherton. We both copied or tried to emulate Mr. Merchant as far back as Guyana School of Agriculture in the 80s, the early 80s. And subsequently, I am finding only this afternoon that I also followed him to Reading University. So a lot of us have learned so much from Mr. Merchant over the years, and when I joined IICA, we were in about the same time, and he's always a gentleman who has a lot to offer and a lot to teach other people, and he has been a good mentor, not only for myself, but several other young professionals at the time within the IICA system. So I know that you have been around for quite some time, and it is his moment, so I wouldn't want to take up all your time, but to wish you, as Greg said, our former Director General would often say, it's not retirement, it's newtirement. But I would urge you, Murchie, don't worry about all of this. I think it's time to take your wife on a cruise after all of this time. You go out and sail and stay away from the agriculture for a while and enjoy yourself. And when you have some time, you can give people advice. But you've paid your dues. Now it's time for you to enjoy your life. Okay, so I wish you all the best and go and enjoy yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Now, I'm told that we can have some moments for persons not advertised in the program to come and bring greetings, commendations. It's not Sunday school, so keep it short, please. And then after that, we will hear and see Mr. Merchant bat. So it's now open for anyone who would like to come and say something on behalf of Mr. Merchant.
Thank you, Mr. Master of Ceremonies, Deputy Governor General, Mrs. Liebert, and Mr. Liebert, Mr. Merchant, Honoree, and Mrs. Merchant, your families, colleagues. I feel compelled to say a few words because Mr. Merchant and myself go a very, very long way back. As you heard earlier on, I was a student, one of the first persons to attempt the the GC agriculture subject, and he told me I made him proud. I didn't realize that. But I appreciate what Mr. Merchant did for me then. And I can say, one thing I could say of Mr. Merchant is that in those days, back in the late 70s, we had no textbooks. We could not afford textbooks. Mr. Merchant wrote every line from the book he had on the blackboard with chalk, and we copied them out. He came to classes during Easter, Christmas, and every vacation, and he was committed to making sure that we achieved best results. Thank you very much for that. Before school days, those days, Mr. Merchant was my cricket captain at Easton's, as Mr. Herbert said, and we enjoyed very pleasant memories. I followed him into cricket, playing with the Nevis cricket team. He was there. And it seemed like I followed him almost everywhere he went, because he was at, when we were at the University of the West Indies, he was in room 99, and I was just across from him at room 101. And so, being there and back in the agriculture department, you know, we have always been close. And even now, he's my neighbor, just 2 houses away. So we have always been very close. And you know, one thing I want to say about Mr. Merchant, which confirms what everybody has said, that he has always had the best interests of the people of Nevis at heart, and especially the farming community. When he went to IICA, I would have gone to the credit union, and Mr. Merchant called me one day and said, I would like to establish a fund to help the farmers on Nevis. The fund wasn't a very large fund, but Mr. Merchant made sure that little things, even such as pesticides, that cost $100 or less, was made available to farmers. And up to today, that fund is still in existence. And I know that he's not going to take it out from the credit union, and whoever succeeds him will have some monies to utilize to the benefit of the farming community in Nevis. Mr. Merchant, you have done exceedingly well. We are very proud of you. When I say we, I mean we. Zion is proud of you. Your farmer students are proud of you. The Department of Agriculture colleagues are proud of you. We are all proud of you in Nevis. And I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. I too get some of the benefits of your labor in the land, and I appreciate that. When I do have some, I'm sure that my wife will share with you. She's the farmer. So all the best in your retirement. May God bless you.
All right, keep it coming. Others?
Good afternoon, everyone. Now, I know most people are figuring this thing is already kind of long. So I'm going to adopt the protocol. Say good afternoon to everybody. And good afternoon. They did me that before, you know. Nobody wants me to talk. It's better now? Better now? Yeah. I was just saying that I know it's long, but I figured that much might have think I didn't say anything. And I'll just finish up by saying there's an old story on a battlefield where the particular team was losing and they had some injured men. And one soldier got injured. And when the general looked around, he said, "Where is the other soldier?" He said, "He's going to look for." And the general said, "Don't go for him. I've lost enough men already." And he said, "I gotta go." And when he went, the soldier was dying. It was his body. And he looked up and he said, "I knew you would come. I knew you would come." And then he gave up the ghost. So Mochi, on behalf of Dexter and me, you knew we would come.
Good afternoon, all. I cannot allow this occasion to pass without saying a few words on Murchie's retirement. Now, most persons may know that Murch and I grew up in the same village. We went to school together. I'm a bit older, he was a younger guy. But I can recall that when I began teaching at River, and Murchie came sometime after, that he showed that willpower to do well. And those days, those of us from the country would know that it was a difficult time. And many of us did not get the opportunity we needed then to excel. It was not because we were not intelligent, but it was due to the paucity of opportunities that existed at the time. But Murchie persisted, and all that he has achieved is by dint of hard work and determination to do well. And so as he goes into retirement, I want to wish him well. I've heard persons speaking about coming back to do something here and to do something there. I said to him, enjoy your time. You have worked hard, you have worked well. And I leave one verse of a poem with Murchie. And that, I'm sure, not only my wish, but the wish of all of us here, that whatever he does, that his nights will be filled with music, and the cares which have infested his day will fold their tents like the Arabs and as silently steal away. Happy retirement, Murchie.
Not so sure why he didn't go into the ministry after he retired. Who's next?
A very good afternoon to all. I guess I was one of the three persons mentioned by Mr. Manners that my dear teacher, Mr. Hansel Manners, spoke to him about. I'm going to be rather brief. Lots of things have been said about Murchie, and indeed, they're all true. But one of the things that has stood out in my mind is that at one point in time, Merchant came to me and said, listen, Fothergill's estate is going to be sold out. People called that classified information at the time. But he did let on to me that Fothergill's estate is going to be sold out. Hardly anybody else knew about that. And he did direct me to tell so and so. In other words, let them be prepared when that moment did come along. Obviously, I went and I told a couple of the fellas. And what I'm most proud about this afternoon is that the poor guys of Zion, Hickmans, and Harrises, through Mr. Merchant's efforts, they are proud landowners, part of the Fothergill's estate. As a matter of fact, I was told that at a particular meeting, when the guys were asked, how much are you prepared to pay? The very guys said, we can only pay this much. And the late Mr. Simeon Daniel, along with Mr. Augustine Merchant, agreed on the price that the poor guys of Zion and Hickman's had agreed to. And for that reason, I say kudos to you, Merchant, for the role that you played in allowing us, the poor guys of Hickman's and Zion, to be the proud owners of the lands that we have here. I only hope that more of that can be done and would be done so that the natives, poor as they are sometimes, can own more of the land. We want to own more of this land. Some of us are sitting idly by, as we'll say, sitting on our laurels while we watch some of the said lands move from our ownership. I'm saying we should rise, and I know Minister Jeffers, he and I had a small discussion prior to now, and I think he's basically on the same page. And I would like to see Minister Jeffers do even more to allow the poor people of Nevis to own, or else I think we can all imagine what will happen afterwards. And then those of our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will not be able to own any of this land anymore. So Minister Jeffers, I'm asking you, sir, to try to ensure that more of us own more of the land that the late Sim Daniel and Mr. Merchant did put into play. Thank you, Merchant. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Charles. And in the interest of time, I know many of you will have occasions later this afternoon, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. All right. Legal counsel want to say something.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sometime last week, Margie and I were on the ferry coming over to Nevis, and he invited me to this function. When I left the office today, I thought it would last from 12:30 to 2. I had a lot of things planned for this afternoon. There are very few people in this world who could have got me to stay here for 4 hours or however long it is. I would have refused to leave no matter how long it goes on. That is because of the relationship I've had with Murchie and the regard that I have for him. I would only say one thing with respect to his professional career. I've had a lot said about him. I think Murchie's greatest strength has been his project writing skills. That is how he managed to get so much funds. That's how he gets funding for projects. That is why donors do not say no to him. It is not because he's so tall and strong and afraid of him, but he has this ability to write projects, and that is the most important thing that, to my mind, he demonstrated in his career. And I say that because we worked so closely together. When I was in government, I was in planning, and he was in agriculture. There are a lot of projects we worked on together. The abattoir is one. I can mention many others, but there's not time enough to speak about them. The second thing I'd like to say is that Murchie really wasn't just about agriculture. He knows a lot about Nevis generally. He talks with me about politics a lot. I won't say too much more than that. And the final thing I'll say is that he has a great sense of humor. A really great sense of humor. And Murchie, in your retirement, now that you're not in St. Kitts, I look forward to our continued discussions. And I know you'll have a few things to say about me and whether or not I'm from Gingerland. I apologize to those of you who may not be able to share that joke, but he thinks that I pretend to be a Gingerland man. partly because of my relationships and associations over the years. I do have a daughter who is very close from where he comes. I'm proud of her, as indeed I'm proud of all of my children. Mochi, when you're responding, please don't say anything about it. Thank you very much.
The last, M&T, super farmer.
Good afternoon to everybody. First, I must say good afternoon to the head table. And good afternoon to everyone in the podium, especially to the farmers. You know, when I met Mr. When I started farming, I met Mr. Merchant. A few words he said to me. He said to me, if anybody can show me that they can do farming, I will give them prospect. I said to him, I hope you can back your chat. Anyway, I remember one time that I planted some tomatoes, didn't have any water. Mr. Merchant said, listen to me, I don't want those tomatoes to die, you know. If you got to hook a hose from Prospect to come down here to water these, I want them to be watered. And you know, I always admire him. He doesn't stay in his office, he come and visit. When I came to some, he told me one time he came to my land, he said, first time I ever see a woman in land with colors in the hair. You know, I just came back from St. Martin with my children. I had 7 children with me. And you know, I had to do farming to feed them. So that's where we come in contact. I came in contact with Mr. Merchant and my children. And what was on my side again, I had my teacher be in the PS. That teacher Elmo, a teacher Elmo tell me, anyway you still and you want it, you just let me know. And I had a little ups and downs in agriculture. Everything doesn't run smoothly. But I managed to ride my boat and direct the channel. You know, sometimes the channel have you, but I managed to direct it sometimes. So I remember Mr. Herbert was the junior minister at one time. He called me in his office also. And he tell me, you know, you see them land, we're not charged with the like the way you work those land, you know. Me and he had our thing, but he give credit. And I must say thank you to you, Mr. Merchant. Thank you, Teacher Elmo. And thank you, Mr. Herbert. Although this is Mr. Merchant time, I think the time when Mr. Merchant will tell me, I know you got your teacher, you know. Anything you want, you go to your teacher. But he really, people that doesn't know me, when they meet me, they say, I know this M&T. I say, how do you know me? He said, Mr. Merchant. Mr. Merchant always calling your name. I believe his wife must be tired or something. When I call the phone, he said, M&T and the phone to you. So I had to be here this afternoon. I had to be, there's a reason why I'm here. And I'm thankful because in the time that you can get through certain things, but people block you, but he never tried. He didn't give me prospect. He always say, I don't give her anything because she always managed on her own. But he gave me the credit that I deserve. He never, ever took it from me. Mr. Merchant, enjoy your retirement. I'm looking forward to it one day. I might be privileged as you to enjoy your retirement. But while you have it, enjoy it to the fullest. God bless you.
8-time consecutive winner of the Farmer of the Year Award in St. Croix. So you've heard from several speakers. The day is fast spent. I'm hungry. I will vacate the stage and hand it over to the man of the hour to bat. cricketer, agriculturist, Mr. Augustine Merchant.
The protocol already established, however, I'd like to mention the Deputy Governor General, Mrs. Hailita Liebert, and past PS Mr. Liebert, Minister Jeffers, past Minister Herbert, and I will regard all the others as my friends. I'm really, really pleased that you have taken the time out to come here this afternoon. I think it was Orwell who said that we spend quite a bit of time here, and I have noticed too much movement. Normally people would be walking out. And I think, I don't know if maybe it's because of the respect you have for me or you haven't left. If that is so, thank you very much. Yes. Well, my career has been a very exciting one. Very, very exciting one. Didn't start that way. But through trials and tribulation, through overcoming some shortcomings, I've been able to make it, and I thank God for that. Now, before I go on, there are some persons who I would like to give really credit for ensuring the success which I have. One is the late Wendell Huggins. Wendell Huggins was a teacher of mine. We're from the same village, and somebody who was a mentor to me. Mr. Huggins, I don't know if most of you know, the first time he went to a high school was when he went to the Bastille Grammar School as a teacher, first time. And he taught me at Nervous School, and maybe he saw something in me, because even when he went off to university, he'd always bring back a book for me. But Wendell should be given a good amount of credit for what I have done. In addition to that, I think it was mentioned here, the other person I'd like to give credit to, as I did a few years ago when I went to Washington, D.C. to receive an award there, the Honorable Simeon Daniel, a great man. I remembered Sunday morning, that was during the time I was playing cricket. Notice I said playing. My mother told me that the premier passed there to look for me when I got back home. So I said, what the premier wanted? She said she doesn't know, but he said he came to look for me. I don't think I've ever spoken to him before then. One thing I know, he was a big cricket fan, and he liked good cricketers. So, and Mr. Daniel, after I got back home this Sunday afternoon from playing cricket, I said, well, okay, first thing I would have to do Monday morning is to go and see Mr. Daniel. And I went and see Mr. Daniel. The line downtown was that long from here to Charlestown, down by the pier. And I was wondering whether or not I was going to have to spend the whole morning there, but just as I got there, he came to the door to escort somebody who he had just finished talking to. And he looked down, and he saw me and beckoned. And I looked him back. And then after I realized it me he wanted, I started passing everybody, walking with the shoulders up. From all the way down to the end, I am well up in line. And he told me what he wanted. I was wondering if Mr. Daniel was in his right mind, because I had returned from Guyana, returned from teachers training college, went to Guyana, and so on and so on and so on. Worked hard at the school, but however, he must have thought something about me. And I think, with respect to Mr. Daniel, he had a good way of spotting talent. Very good way of spotting talent. And the rest is history. The other person who I would like to pay some credit to, and a large amount of credit, is sitting right here at that table there. I think it is a, you know, sometimes I wonder what would I have been. Maybe I would have been one of the biggest contractors in Nevis. Because I went to Nevis School from, I was in 7th standard maybe at 10 years old. And at 14, after spending 4 years there, I say, tell my mother, you know, I think I'm going to learn a trade, you know. And during the summer I went, after doing all the exams and so on, result came back, got distinction and so on. And during the summer Mr. Brown told me, no. You can't go and learn trade. You're 14 years old. You have to go to school. So Mr. Brown, you know, my mother can't send me high school. Couldn't afford to. I said, at those days, you could have started teaching with the College of Preceptor. Mr. Brown said, I don't want him in the school. He hired somebody else who hired a College of Preceptor, but he didn't want me. And Mr. Brown, the first time I'm saying it in public, as I said, when I got the award in Washington, I also gave credit to him also. Mr. Brown went to Golden Rock. Golden Rock was one of the first hotels, one of the earlier hotels to open in Nevis. And Mr. Brown went there and got some fun for me to travel to high school. And Mr. Brown didn't just do that with me. Charles Bosso there. We were both classmates. I can give you a joke about Bosso. Mr. Bosso decided he can learn trade too. But whereas I went to learn carpentry, he went to the gentleman to learn masonry. And Mr. Bosso went out to learn masonry, took the stone and went under a tree to cut it up. And the boss man got so furious. And you know, those days, those guys used to have song. And after Mr. Bosso got one, he didn't go back. You know, and however, both of us went off to Charleston Secondary School as two guys from Mr. Brown's primary school, all-age school. And when I got into high school at the age of 14, they put me in Form 4B. By the next year, I was in 5A1 with all those students who went Form 1, Form 2, and 3. And by the time I left school, I had just as many subjects as them after 2 years. And I went to teach at age 16. I went to teach at St. John's Primary School. And there was a certain lady there who is now a Deputy Governor General. I remember I had a class of about 30. And that class, after 2 minutes, I finished telling them what I had to tell them. And a session lasted for half an hour. But in 2 minutes, I didn't have anything else to tell them. So the children started to get restless and started to make noise. And Mrs. Liebert had to come and help me out. And I remember those days, she having the class and I standing up at the back as almost like a student. And I was mystified, you know. I said, how she get it done? Because she's talking to them for half an hour. How she get this thing done? You know, and I was wondering, something got to be wrong with me. However, at that same time, I started teachers training college. In those days, teachers training college, you had to do 2 years in service, and then you go to college full time, the third year. After the first year, they say, there's no need to go to second year. I went straight. Maybe I might have been one of the few people in this teachers training college who got skipped. And so that began my career in teaching. I went to college, came back, I learned the tricks of the trade. Mr. Designer, I was just as good as you. Yeah, so I learned the tricks of the trade. And after I came back from college, I think, you know, as youngsters, Mr. Busso and I, we from the same area. And there were 2 courses which came out. One was in agriculture in Guyana, and one was in the college in St. Lucia. So we decided, he said he can take the one for St. Lucia. And I decided, I'll go Guyana. And the rest is history. As you read, Mr. John and Danny at the time, they have all been to Guyana subsequently. But as I said, it was a good trip. Had many challenges, but maybe if it didn't have the challenges, it wouldn't have been so sweet. I enjoyed every bit of it. And one of the things which really I like is that I was helping people, poor people, people who are like me. And you know, it was my greatest joy. Emantine. I remember when Emantine started out agriculture. It wasn't Emantine of today who go to the Virgin Island and win for 10 years in a row, or whatever number of years. You know, and as I said, I've seen Emantine to stand on her own, and there are a number of other farmers, and it really pleased my heart. Because I don't like to see people waste time. Life is too short for us to waste time. And the other thing is that there are some persons who I would really like to thank also. Miss Ingrid Green-Mills, fantastic worker. Mrs. Green, I met Ingrid at IICA. She might have been there maybe 4 years. And I should tell her, IICA is in the Federation since 1982, somewhere there. And she wasn't there from the inception, but she has been there much longer. So I remember when I walked in the morning and so on, she had to show me around. But as any good boss, you want to make sure that not many people show you around for too long. So I started a little fast. But she has been a very, very, very devoted worker. I could stay at home and call Ingrid. Ingrid, so. And she would do it. And I don't think she get the respect. Mr. Representative? Give Ingrid a round of applause. There were some other good persons who I have come across, and I don't want to mention too many, but one of them in particular I must mention, Miss Merle Morton. You surprised? Stalwart lady. I remember when I was at the department, somebody mentioned I'd like to go in the field, so you can't fool me. Those ladies walking cotton down pot walks, sometimes I done at 4 o'clock before them. And, but Merle, letters, we'll get letters, Merle would read them, and Merle would reply to them. A lot of time I come in, she said, Mr. Merton, okay, read it. I reply. I made a reply. And most time I tell her, let's go ahead. That kind of initiative is sorely lacking in the civil service today. People don't take initiative. And Maul, I want to thank you. I think both she and Ingrid should stand up and let us give them a round of applause. Yeah. There are other persons who I have had some very good time. Weber and Dexter. They're my two mates from school. You know, I want to say it because a few days ago we met and Dexter was telling me how I slept in his home and he was out. But such was the relationship between us. Up to this day, my mother and Weber are the best of friends. Weber mother and the best of friend. Dexter mother, I could go there anytime they are not home, and I could stay there. We got on extremely well. As a matter of fact, when Weber went off to live in the Virgin Island, I went and spent a couple of days with him. So I had some very, very good relationships with persons. And you know, I would really want to thank all of those who have made my journey a good journey. Danny, you've been splendid. You know, Danny was the marketing person here. Didn't have too much problem in anything. Up to today, I boast about it, Danny. Every Friday on my desk, they start from the Four Seasons sale. So I could show up to Mr. Gregwell, and I gave him a copy of them over the 10 years period. You know, information that were there. Sidney Newton again, the livestock. We were selling livestock thing to Four Seasons. Those guys were the champion of those things. You know, all I do is, if they have a problem, I'm there with them to support them. So I've had some splendid support. Now, one of the things is that, I think it was mentioned, that I have had a lot of politicians in my department. Those are not the only three. Lady Hazel Brandy, she worked at my department at one time. And so it was like a balancing act, because a lot of times you pass in the department, in the hall, you hear politics, and sometimes you have to pretend that you don't hear it. Otherwise you run yourself in trouble. So, you know, I tried my utmost to do that. And I think one of the things is that it wasn't about the politician, it was about the people of Nevis. And I think too many of us as civil servants, we place attention to the politician rather than doing what our work entails. As Oral Martin said, we have been very good friends over many years. And working on projects. I can remember when the Nevis airport was lengthened. Sometimes Oral had to come to his office at 3 o'clock in the morning to talk to somebody in Europe, you know, on time and so on. Such was the commitment of people of that generation. And, you know, it's really sad sometimes to see, you know, the lack of interest, the lack of commitment which young people are exhibiting today. And, you know, if I could do anything, if you could do anything, I really would like you to do it, because our society is slipping. Our society is slipping. And we cannot achieve much if we don't have standard. I would like to thank all my colleagues in St. Lucia, Dominica, Antigua, and all the other islands. I had a wonderful relationship. I normally look forward to our trip to Costa Rica every year. That's a time when we get to, you know, line with each other and so on. Our friend here, minister here, he would have had some of that. You know what I'm talking about, you know, when we go to Costa Rica annually, you know. And as I said, Mr. John, I'm really happy to see you this afternoon. Even when he was repping Jamaica, we sometimes You know, he will shout me up and sound quite good. And when I go to St. Lucia, you know, he normally take me where normally those people are thirsty, they not really take them. So thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, in closing, let me thank everybody. In closing, I really appreciate your coming. I really appreciate the comments which you made. And let us all try our best to ensure that Nevis improves. Thank you very much. We have some cakes and some other things, so.